All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. And tonight, this is our Mother's Day episode, and we're going to go into the Spiderverse, which I guess in one of the Spider universes, it might be related to Mother's Day in some way, some fashion. I don't know, but we're going to do it anyway. This is episode 128 of the show. Show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/128, where you have a special show with you tonight. We're going to have a couple of really cool guests. We'll introduce them in just a moment on the last night's portion of the show. But before we do that, we'll say hello to Robert. How you doing? You're sweating like a little pig there, like a spider pig. Or
like a little spider hammy?
Yeah, spider ham.
Yeah, it's a real embarrassment of riches for comic book fans lately. I'm old enough to remember a time when we had these super low budget crap fests like Captain America and the very first Fantastic Four movie. And now we get these amazing films like Spiderverse and all the Marvel movies. It's a pretty crazy time to be alive.
Definitely.
No, it's not not your cue at all.
Don't worry, I'll leave this in. This is good stuff.
Cool.
So this is the Actual Anarchy podcast. We're going to get into the last nighters portion of the show, which can be found in the Launchpad Media. So I'll play that intro real quickly. It's 15 seconds long, and then we'll introduce Jack V Lloyd of the Voluntarist Comic and the Philosopher. Stand by. Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters. And the Last Nighters are part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. This is episode 71. It's going to be Into the Spiderverse for Mother's Day, and we have two very special guests, some of the hardest working people in the AnCap libertarian movement. It's Jack V Lloyd of the Voluntarist Comic and the Philosopher. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Great.
Especially since we just had lots of good sushi.
Yeah, miso soup.
Yeah.
That sounds
very healthy.
sounds like a quality meal. And this is our show where we talk about movies. And so we're going to talk about the Spider-Man movie. And it just so happens it's related to comic books. And that's one reason why, Jack V Lloyd, why we like having you on for this type of stuff, because you do a comic. And
I do.
A centerfold for you for the last couple of years. And I think we might have another one in the works.
Yeah.
And you've got an Indiegogo campaign. Why don't you tell our audience about that before we start getting into the movie?
Sure. And yes, as you said, you've been consistently putting in beautiful 2-page spreads that are just amazing. You know, just you're turning the pages of the comic and then suddenly, boom, Actual Anarchy, it's there. And it's wonderful. So this new comic campaign is for Origins 3. It's just continuing the voluntarist universe story. It's going through the canon story chronologically. So this one is just continuing from where we left off last in 2, and then of course 1. We're about, I'd say, 2-ish weeks away from close. So things have been pretty successful so far. It's really good. I think over 57% funded so far. So I'm very excited, and we're going to be doing some live streams for sure leading up to that, and some promos and things like that, just to generate some excitement and close strong. But I'm especially excited because this issue we have a new art team that's upping the quality, and so
way better.
Yeah, even better than before. Yeah, definitely noticeably better if you look at the cover. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds great. Yeah, we're excited to be a part of that. You guys both do excellent work. And the Philosopher, tell us about what is. If someone doesn't know what you do, what's your 30-second elevator pitch for them?
Clear his throat. Okay. Memes, videos, music videos, educational content, pictures, modeling, podcast. We started a podcast. Yeah, that's under 5 minutes. Basically, I talk about philosophy, self-knowledge, and voluntarism. And I have a lot of commentary on things that are just happening in the world. And yeah, just trying to people's mind more.
All right. Well, that's a very noble effort. We will put links to everything you've got on our show notes page, which will be lastnighters.com/71. And why don't you just each throw one link out there that is easy to remember and people can go to just based on listening.
Exactly. So Voluntarius is at volcomic.com. That's volcomic.com. And that's where you can find all you need to know about the universe. There's links to the latest campaign. There's links to the past comics. So again, volcomic.com, easy to find. No problem at all. Just type that on in and you'll be there.
For me, it's thepholosopher.com. It's spelled like philosopher, except the first I is actually an O, like pho noodles. So philosopher.com.
All right. I think people will be able to figure that one out. And Robert, my co-host.
Yeah, buddy.
How can people find you these days?
Oh, you can go to Trupster.com, and it's just a hot link to my t-shirt designs.
Nice.
Ooh.
And eventually it'll be other stuff, like art stuff that I'm drawing, comic stuff. But for now, that's what it is.
I want to hear about more about that. What you're doing with comic stuff.
Yeah, cool. And this
Yeah.
t-shirt thing.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I could tease you with some art that I'm working on actually as we
I
speak.
love being teased. Yes.
Cool. Stuff.
Ooh.
I can screen share some hotness.
Robert is the creative. He's the creative of our tag team over here.
Yeah, okay. Are you the linear logical?
He's the one that actually get things done, and then I'm the other one. I'm the other guy.
Yeah, you guys maybe? Trying. You're the idea.
That's it, man.
Create.
We both got some ideas, I think.
Yeah.
We butterfly around a little bit. Unfortunately, that's pretty commie of us, but we're trying to get better.
Cool.
I'm proud of you.
All right, so Robert's gonna pull up whatever he's working on, and while he does that, I will get into the Google description, which is how we start talking about the movies on this show, The Last Nighters. And so, Into the Spiderverse came out 2018, fantasy sci-fi, 1 hour 56 minutes, 8.5 on the IMDb, 97% Rotten Tomatoes, 87% Metacritic, and 97% of the Google users like it. The description is: teen Miles Morales becomes Spider-Man of his reality, crossing his path with 5 counterparts from another dimensions to stop a threat for all realities. The Google description has some grammatical errors, and it came out on December 14th, 2018, and directed by Peter Ramsey, Bob Perischetti, and Rodney Rothman. Box office of $375.3 million on a budget of $90 million, and won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature Film. Robert, your thoughts on the description?
No, it didn't really say what it was about so much. I mean, Miles, he becomes Spider-Man. It is an origin story movie, so if that turns you off, I'm sorry. It does lose a little bit for me because it's an origin story. But to be fair, it kind of glosses over a lot of the origin and just kind of gets right into it. It's not like the whole movie is all about him finally at the end becoming Spider-Man. I mean, he does, but there's a whole lot of Spider-Man action before that. Yeah.
And he's a net new character, isn't he?
Yeah, he's new. He's
So it's a new origins, never before written about.
right. I mean, he came out in 2011. So I'm sure this is probably the first time a lot of people have heard of this guy, but he's a popular kid in the comic world, and they did an amazing job. I don't know. This is like a one giant big love letter to comic fans. They're actually, comic book fans, not just like fans of the movies, but fans of the comic books.
Yeah,
I mean,
it seemed
from
like
all
they
the
had
details.
they had a bunch of like different Easter eggs related to each of the different types of Spider-Man. And I felt as a bit of a layperson. I mean, I watched Spider-Man when I was a kid, the cartoon series, and they actually had a snippet of that from the very beginning of that show, like in the 4:3 format. But I felt like it really was more speaking to the physical book readers, the physical comic book readers, and giving them all these nods all over the place.
Was it distracting for you, not being a comic book guy?
No, I knew it was talking to it was talking to something. And so now it makes me curious to go back and look at that stuff. So in a way, it might be, snaring in some people who are Spider-Man familiar, just not with all the nuance.
Okay, because I could see it be either inviting or obnoxious in how much it nods to the comic books endlessly. Like all the little sound effects on screen, like pow or zip or pop or whatever, and bonk. And I loved it, but I don't know.
I thought the art was really pretty.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that kind of stuff, zip, pow, bam stuff, I mean, that's like 60s style Adam West Batman. I don't think that's necessarily some kind of a super niche thing to just Spider-Man fans. And I felt like I was watching almost like a living comic book. And
I know, Jack, you watched a director's commentary of what they were trying to accomplish. And from what I understand, they were actually going for that. They were trying to make this look like it was literally the page in motion. And they had a tremendous effort with the amount of animation and animators that they had working on this project. From what I read, it was the largest staffing of animation people at Sony Animation Studios in ever for any feature they've ever worked on.
Wow, yeah, I agree that the artwork was extremely diverse and engaging in terms of like how they did it. It definitely, at least for the visuals, brought something new to the screen that, at least, you know, in the way that they composited everything, like felt like it hadn't been done before. I mean, I'm not sure I can't even relate it to any particular movie in terms of all the different ways they try to make it seem like it was a movie that was, you know, the comic book page, as you said, coming to life. So that was definitely unique in how they presented that. And I definitely enjoyed that aspect of it, you know, watching the movie for the art sense and how they did those visuals and then integrated the different designs. As you said, they had some nods to past Spider-Man universe characters, you know, things like that they brought in. So it was interesting how they, you know, animated those art, you know, figures differently and stuff. So
yeah, I almost had like a 300 or Sin City almost vibe to it, just in my watching of it, even though that kind of blended computer animation and live action, where this was all computer animation.
Right.
Right. And those two movies were both directly taken from comic books. Like those are both adapted from Frank Miller's comic books, almost in a frame by frame, page to page, panel to panel format.
Oh.
So although as far as I know, this Into the Spider-Verse wasn't adapted from any one comic book. Does anybody know if that's true? I thought this was like an original story.
I'm not sure offhand because I didn't read the
research
original
that.
comic for it. But
Me either. For me, this is the first time I was introduced to this character. I saw a print comic about it, so I'm not sure if it exists.
Yeah, I know they had some nods to like some of the more famous Spider-Man moments, like in film, where he's like got the two subway cars and he's holding them together with the web. And
Right.
a couple of other like little brief. There's like a ton of little brief nods to things, but they happen so quickly that I don't think they like slow it down or drag you down or anything like that. Like you can just see them and they're pretty, but if you know, then it's like, okay, thank you guys for putting that in. Like there's a scene where they go to Aaron's apartment, and on the little screen behind him, there's Donald Glover wearing a Spider-Man pajamas outfit. Like a little tiny little thing they threw in there.
Yeah.
For the fans, you know.
Right.
I mean, it didn't have to be there. It could have been just nothing, but
yeah, definitely lots of little Easter eggs.
Yeah, the love that was put in this film seems like it was made by people who love comic books. That just comes through. You couldn't say this was made like this some Hollywood hacks that didn't know what they were doing. This is absolutely people who are neck deep in comic book love.
Now, is this an example?
To do what and they hired the right people. The comic book love.
Yeah, so
it could be possible.
I was thinking, you know, Robert, you and I talked about Blade Runner 2049 like a year or so ago, and I think we had similar comments, like that was a love letter for the fans of that genre or that particular title or brand or universe or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah,
that one didn't have a big enough fan base to really make that as successful of a movie as I think the expectations were. Whereas the Marvel Universe and Spider-Man, much wider appeal, much larger fan base. And so I think that the effect is much greater in this movie.
Yeah, they're obviously writing the success. I mean, probably the only thing that stopped it from making more money was the fact that it's animated. And animated movies still have a bit of a stigma being kids' movies. Although I think this has wide appeal. I don't know if you're going to super enjoy it when you're 80-something years old. So maybe a little bit kinetic, a little bit too fast moving. Although I loved the kinetic action in this film. It's so beautiful. But I mean, I think kids would absolutely love this movie. Yeah. And it won an Academy Award, didn't it, for Best Animated Feature? I mean, not that I give a shit about the Academy Awards, but it's nice that it's getting props. Yeah. Usually that's something that goes to Pixar. So
I think it was rated PG.
Was it PG?
There was a fair amount of the old violence.
Such a day. But it definitely felt PG, or at the very most PG. So, you know, that PG, with the art, I think, and some of the humor, it was, you know, it wasn't full on adult crass humor. It was like more. I
mean, there were a few deaths and plenty of violence, you know,
yeah,
some gunshots and stuff,
but not like outrageous gore and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it was definitely directed, especially the age of the characters as well, was directed towards a younger audience.
Yeah, that PG-13 crowd.
Yeah, middle
Teen Beat,
school.
Teen Vogue, whatever group. When my wife and I watched it, we were like, well, could this potentially be a movie we watch with the kids in their, 3 and 5? They're almost 4 and 6. And after watching like the first 20 minutes, we're like, no. When
No.
Kingpin like stomps out Spider-Man and finally kills him.
That was pretty, yeah,
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
graphic.
That was a very interesting they had. They had the perfect Spider-Man, right? The one who was killed, he was supposedly very perfect in that kid's universe, the main Spider-Man.
Yeah, he was the blonde one. He was
Yeah.
trim and like
Fit, was with
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane.
Yeah. Things were good. Right. And then you had the guy who in the other universe, total slob, and made all these like so interesting. That sort of
Yeah, I enjoyed him. I kind of relate to him now. I used to work out a fair amount, and I haven't in a while. So now I feel like I got the little spare tire around the tummy.
Dad bod city over there.
yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Oh,
Yeah, I love that he went around the movie wearing sweatpants for the most of it. That was great.
right. I think it was a comment too by one of the characters. Like, are you wearing
Yeah, it's not a blanket, but
He's got things going on. Come on now.
a blanket? Would have made more sense. It'd be warm. It's cold when you got there.
So Daniel, what did you think about the plot of this movie? It's an origin story, like I said, and it's a bit wacky with all the interdimensional shenanigans and whatnot. But at the heart of it is a villain who is trying to replace lost loved ones. So I think you can probably identify with him in that sense. But he's so single-minded that he doesn't care how many people get hurt in his path of doing that. Did you appreciate the story? Did you like the interdimensional wackiness? I mean, when a talking cartoon pig comes out, are you like, oh, this is just too crazy? Or were you like, oh, this fits?
well, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, the title sort of gives it away, but in a somewhat ambiguous way. And so without having read much about it before watching it, I wasn't expecting it to cross the stream, so to speak, and have all these like different Spider-Man and the pig Spider-Man and all that stuff.
Yeah. That was
And going into it and not knowing that when Kingpin kills Spider-Man, it becomes like, whoa, they killed Spider-Man in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, what? How could you kill it off so quickly? But then,
Right. And of course, I did know that Miles becomes Spider-Man by the end. And so I was thinking, okay, that's what happens. Like Miles is thrust into this situation. He's too young. He's not prepared. But Spider-Man's dead and he's got the abilities, right? So he's going to become the little anarchist Spider-Man.
yeah. I felt like Spider-Man died too easily in the beginning.
Yeah, they did.
I agree.
They had that whole build-up of him
Yeah.
getting beat up and now he's getting back up.
One of my issues is with consistent power levels.
Right.
So the Kingpin is just a guy.
Mhm.
He's a normal guy. He's a big giant guy, but he's just a guy. Maybe he could like lift like 1,000 pounds and that'd be like, good. Spider-Man can lift like 10,000 pounds.
Yeah.
He'd get punched in the face by Kingpin pretty much all day and he'd be okay. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
great.
Definitely get
But
out the
he would.
way. Like with his webs, he's always been really fast.
Yeah. Oh, they did give Kingpin like a block effect, so I don't know if he got stronger because he became like a block of cheese. But
Yeah.
He was kind of really big old bucket.
Right.
He looked great, by the way. I loved his design. I loved all the character
Yeah.
designs. So.
I was like, he's just a giant square
Right.
with a little head, right? He's
Yeah.
the center of mass.
he gains power the more square he becomes. So.
The more geometrical he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the more
Hey,
sense he
can
gains.
I want to posit a theory. I love watching videos like this. I mean, part of it's the art. That's just the entertainment factor, everything, and it's inspiring to see that level of art in it. But I always love any movie I watch, cartoon or otherwise. I love wondering what were the writers, and like a movie like this, I don't know how many writers helped with the story and everything. But I always wonder what was their motive and what was the picture they were trying to convey. Probably not in an obvious manner, And so I want to posit that theory. I think that what I'm seeing is in the very beginning, they kill off the ideal version of Spider-Man, the blonde hair, light-eyed, like white guy with a wife, and it just, and he's really fit. He's a man. That's just killing off, I think, the traditional stereotype of what a hero is in America. I guess like in American comics, particularly. And then introducing all these different kinds of heroes, from a little Asian girl to a young black kid. He's like in middle school, high school, and then like a girl. I don't know. She looks like high school age too, like that blonde girl. And then, well, you did have that guy who I'm pretty sure was voiced by Nicolas Cage. He sounded like from the
Was
Black.
him,
Yeah,
he was.
He was a cool character. But I mean that was more of I think a nod to just that old style. And same thing with the little pig. That was like a very old style of drawing, like that I remember drawing. Yeah. Anyway, I thought my theory was the idea that they wanted to convey was that anybody can be Spider-Man. You don't have to be the fit, blonde, white guy. You can be anybody. You can be a little Asian girl. You can be, a little kid. You can be anything. That's what I thought the underlying theme was. So I don't know what you guys think.
Well, let me ask you, did you like that? I mean, it sounds like I didn't even put that together, that it was symbolic of them killing the traditional superhero of the white man.
What are your thoughts, Jack?
Did you like that? Or did you think it felt a little forced? Was it a little too social justice-y, or what did you think?
I mean, yeah, it's like, I'll just say, I mean, you can go first if you want.
Oh, well, so I think, Robert, were you asking my opinion?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the show. You're here to talk about your opinions.
Oh. My opinions. Okay, so I thought, it was neutral to me, at least what I'm remembering of it so far. I don't remember. I remember there was a lot of destruction of property, right?
Yeah, I mean, along the way.
That was one thing that bothered me, but that's
pretty standard, really, in these comic movies.
Yeah, and superheroes in general. So it was kind of benign to me. I don't remember them advocating for violence of any. The first Spider-Man, he died nobly, speak. So I mean, I don't know. I can understand if someone's really passionate about that topic, like they're really into people, like they're into shifting social norms, really the goal. And
Right.
If it's done in that way, if they're just trying to do that, I didn't see a malevolence could be extracted. I could just disagree with the idea to an extent, like if someone takes it to the extreme where literally anybody can save all these people and be super strong and on par with Spider-Man, and like how Spider-Man traditionally was. He's really strong. If you're trying to say that anybody can, like literally anybody, you just have to forget the line they said. It was at the end. Anybody can. I can't remember why. If you think, I can't remember. It's like if you care, I don't know. But I would disagree with that idea philosophically. So it's just more of a philosophical disagreement on like whether or not that's logical to say that anybody can be a strong super and save a bunch of there's this anyone can save somebody else, but there are limitations in terms of ability. I recognize that. And so I think that is what I would probably challenge somebody. I'm neutral to them putting it in the movie. Well, not neutral. I shouldn't. Obviously, I don't want. Those aren't the social norms I'm like super focused on spreading, but I'm neutral in that. I don't think it was like, they're being violent. That ends my opinion. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on that. Jack has some good thoughts.
So if you saw with the movie, the thing that was interesting to me, of course, is what she said in terms of the symbolism. They both had a symbolism in the beginning of killing off the original Spider-Man, and at the end, they had the fat white Spider-Man who couldn't maintain a relationship and had lots of self-doubt get sent back to his respective dimension. I think that was meant to evoke what you were just talking about, which is this idea of killing off the traditional form of Spider-Man and introducing a diversity of characters. And of course, some of these characters are characters that are real in the comics and stuff. So it's like I'm not like complaining about whatever real thing, but there is a focus with that. That was not accidental. It was very intentional. And the directors even talked about that in the commentary, that their goal was to like bring out this like new kind of diversity with it. And of course, there's a market sense to that where they're just trying to be like, okay, let's reach out to new audiences. Let's try to get everybody to buy in, because if any kid watching it, no matter what they are, thinks they could be Spider-Man, well, now you just have a bought in new audience of any kind, right? It's no longer, it's just some white guy. Okay, well, if I'm black, if I'm some Asian girl or something like that, I could be Spider-Man. So of course, monetarily, that makes sense. They're trying to get people hooked in by using that psychology. But the part that's actually sinister, and I think this is where a lot of people lose that, who are anti-SJW, just in the aesthetic, as opposed to the philosophical, is that the movie promoted a theme of egalitarianism in ability and power. So this is not so much an issue of like anybody could be Spider-Man, because obviously you get bit by a spider, whatever, you have these powers. The bigger issue is the training that came with mastering those skills. And this is something that has been a trope across many different films, especially anything that's Disney related.
Post 2000s.
Yeah, that's most certainly. And it's this idea that effort and work ethic are to be devalued and seen as something that is wrong or privileged, and that
Or just
if you
ignored.
or just ignored,
Just left out
true.
of the picture.
We think like, yeah,
It's a logical whole.
right. And if people just want to be anything they want to be, it's this idea of like belief is truth or belief is reality. That is now what is the acceptable norm. And of course this,
corrosive.
right, and that's very corrosive. This is what ties into, radical SJWism, which is just this idea of, if I identify as this today, I'm now that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that is seeping into comics and even in this movie, and it might seem benign at first, but the underlying message through the character narratives is that basically it's like, if you just believe, now you have powers and now you have skill. And that to me is extremely dangerous and destructive, obviously on young kids, because it brings them the sense of, I just believe and then I can, or I deserve to be something. And that's even where, gets even worse, is this entitlement mentality where you think you deserve something just because you say you are this thing. And this theme was not just limited to the characters, but if you look at the narrative and how they structured the family, the father, of course, was a police officer, and they always play this in movies where it's like, if there's a cop, he's hard, but he's right at the end of the day, right? He's hard on you, but it's okay. His status authority is really care. Yeah. And then when they push him to go to the elite private prep school, the focus,
he's like, he demands his child say I love you.
Right.
He's using his authority
right.
to like say I love you.
They use violent communication, like, threats, force, ultimatums, and they normalize that because that's a status mentality, and they try to trauma bond with people. And for those not familiar with trauma bonding is where people are put into a situation that is violent or oppressive or threatening or humiliating, and through that experience they bond with the people in their life. And that is the case with the father, is that there's this violence and threats and shame. There's not peaceful communication, but through that and their living struggles, like that brings them together. And the father, in pushing his child to go to elite school, if you notice, there is this kind of built-in theme of what you'd expect of like the upper progressive leftist mentality of like, I get to go to an elite prep school, even though he earned it because he got in the test, and he denounces it and plays down his effort, right? He plays down.
It's bad to be segregated. Right.
It is. It mentions that too, that it's bad because he's segregated from other students because he goes to this elite prep school, but he downplays the fact that he did well in the test, which is funny enough. Even in a moment where there's a meritocracy, he downplays his meritocracy portion in that by downplaying how well he did on the test. And then when he goes to elite school,
he's almost ashamed.
He's like ashamed of it, right? He downplays it there and makes it seem like it's a bad thing, like having money, which of course is just providing value in the market for most cases, or having elite education or academic standards is somehow like a bad thing, like performance is bad, elitism is bad. But it's not really elitism in a status sense of like, you're threatening people, stealing from them, destroying their property. It's just, if I work hard and have education and have a really great experience at an elite institution, that's somehow something I should be ashamed of and feel bad about. And it's this kind of mentality that if you're in that leftist progressive psychology and you have status or you have money, well, okay, that's okay as long as you feel bad about it, right? As long as you like denounce, it's like, poo, that's bad, privilege. Right? You recognize your privilege, but as long as you recognize and check your privilege, it's okay. Okay, then you can be at the elite school. Then you can be with all the other people, have this money and status. As long as you denounce it and just say, I'm just so privileged, and then it's okay, right? So they have this built-in theme of that egalitarianism with self-shaming or self-loathing for status or for hard work, and they try to replace that with this idea of
Marxism.
Well, right, because it is
saying, it's about classes, the rich versus the poor.
In that sense, it is a form of that cultural aspect of Marxist theory, which is the idea that all people are totally equal in ability, or more so, no matter what they do, no matter what value they provide to others, they should be rewarded the same. And again, there's a big difference between respecting human dignity and everybody's rights and saying, well, just because I, took a shovel and dug in the dirt, my labor is now as valuable as someone who like works to develop the next, computer processor.
Right.
So it is this very sinister psychological message that underpins the entire movie that if you don't, pay attention to it, you might just miss it, especially if you're just, a kid watching, enjoying the action. But if you listen to the director's commentary, it actually firmly corroborates that analysis you can make of the entire theme of the movie, which is that it's meant to seed in this idea that having money or having prestige is bad, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Get rid of white archetypes, white male archetypes, replace it with diversity, and everybody deserves to be powerful. And belief is what makes you effectively a hero or talented. Not hard work, not studying hard, not honing your craft, but just belief that, I'm going to do this, and that's everybody now. And that's that psychological egalitarianism that in many ways for me maybe chuckle throughout the movie.
To me, it's frightening that these people with these minds have the budget, the ability, spend $90 million on a movie, be able to seed in their ideas. But that's why we're trying to continue the volunteer, because I for competition against that. I'm inspired by their art. I'm inspired by their to execute, but I am wholly dissatisfied with philosophical undertone.
Which is a reminder that there's no such thing realistically in most any medium of like having a comic movie that doesn't have philosophy. It's always in there, and if you miss it, you might have to just like look into it to understand it. But it comes through
philosophical opinion.
Right, the character dialogue, how someone is seen as a hero or anti-hero or a villain, how those themes are presents the philosophical narrative that leaves you with what you're supposed to be thinking and feeling, and that's the scary part.
Understandable. You can't help but color whatever your own beliefs and bias, your output, and especially if you believe that's how the world is. Well, you're trying the world is.
We just got deep there. We were just dancing around and just waiting for that moment when that door was going to be open.
And that's our show, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Oh.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
But you put a lot out there, and I think a lot worthy of discussion. I kind of want to go in several different directions simultaneously. Sure. But my take on this before seeing the movie was that Stan Lee was criticized for response he gave to a question about why is Peter Parker a white guy from Brooklyn. And after he died, I think it was last November, there were articles bringing that up and being like, look at this bias and hatred of Stan Lee because he was against there being, different versions of Spider-Man, even though there were different versions of Spider-Man as attested by this very movie and the origin stories that are talked about. But when I first heard that, there's going to be a Miles Morales character and, it's that SJW thing where they want everyone to be, there's like a quota to fill. Your characters,
Spider quota.
Like
your web cannot be white. It must be at least 30% brown, 30% gray, 10% yellow web.
Because why would you imply that webs are white?
Right.
They are
right.
And yellow.
White webs out of here.
And when the new Doctor Who got announced and it was a woman, like a big deal, but other people weren't satisfied because it was a white woman or something,
Right. Yeah. There's no satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, you can never make these people happy. And I saw a meme after that said the next Doctor Who is going to be this crippled, like, Muslim woman. Rascal.
Right.
Wearing a bikini, but it's not
they're
a
like,
bikini. It's
she went back in time to get triggered in the past. You're like, it's nuts, though. It really is nuts. I've always been anti-SJW for philosophical reasons. I don't care about superficial. I don't care about what people choose to do with what they want with their life. Like, that's not my thing. Like, you know what I mean? As a principal voluntarist, I don't care. Whatever people want to do, as long as you're not initiating force against the people, that. I don't care about what color or disability characters people want to have. I don't care about that either. That's not the real issue. The real issue is that in an attempt to kind of both appease people like who are demanding, you need to have more representation, and also promoting a narrative of anybody can just do anything through, magical belief, like magical thinking. It's what's really sinister more so about that is that it's being pushed onto kids, and the kids are just having this layered into their psychology where it is subconsciously changing their views about what they think about the world. And that, to me, what that drives at is the entitlement mentality. That's the real root problem that actually is developed here is this idea that there, hard work, you know what I mean? What is that? You know what I mean? Hard work. Oh, if you have power, if you have riches, if you have skills, that was just privilege, right? That was the reason why you had those things. And so it's a denouncement of the idea that people actually need, a drive, goals, work ethic to craft and make mistakes and hone their skills. And to me, that's what's really scary. You know what I mean? I don't care, all day, every day, I don't care. I'll watch whatever when it comes to superhero stuff. If the story's good, if the character's engaging, I don't care if they're, some disabled black lesbian. If it's good, if the context's good, it's good. I don't care about the superficial. But when it comes to the underlying philosophical, if they're trying to push that narrative, that's what they're trying to really, sinisterly get kids to think, is that anyone who has, success, power, and when I say power, I mean like in terms of like intellectual power or skill power, social influence, stuff like that, where they honed a craft. That's specifically what I'm talking about here. That is somehow just purely privilege, no work ethic whatsoever. And if you want to be just like them, oh, well, that's just belief, right? That's just realigning, redistributing the power structures, and now suddenly magically, oh, see, now you're equal to anybody else too, just because you think that way. And that's magically you just think, oh, now I'm smart. Oh, okay, you're smart. No, like, oh, now I'm talented at this thing. No, it takes hard work to get craft your skill. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, that's the real SJW nonsense.
Yeah, I wonder if they redistributed their Oscars to people that didn't have Oscars. Because, it was just luck that they happened to make that movie. It wasn't like hard work and effort that went into making the movie, and a lot of talent.
Right. Yeah, effort, huge amounts of effort from what I read. The 177 animators working on this thing.
Yeah.
But speaking of the mindset, Robert, you sent me an article this afternoon, and this might be, a little sidebar discussion about one of the directors defending the tactics of Antifa, thinking that they are actually fighting against this scourge of a resurgence of white supremacy in the United States.
Yeah, it's the first guy listed. It's Peter Ramsey. He got into a Twitter discussion with another guy, and he seems to be the kind of guy that takes the default standard, like, lefty position. Like, he doesn't. Okay, this is my take on it. That Peter Ramsey doesn't seem to be a deep philosophical thinker. Like, he's more in line. He's making his art, and he has certain beliefs, but he's in Hollywood, right? He's operating in Hollywood with all these other lefties, and he's getting hit with this cultural Marxism. And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. And then he gets online and he gets talking about what Antifa is. And he probably watches CNN. And then, every once in a while, he'll watch like MSNBC just in case CNN didn't get all the facts right. So he's like super well informed, and he knows enough about Antifa as they are anti-fascists, right? I mean, that's what they are, right? They're not anything else. They're the guys that are against the fascism, right?
As far as you got to go, the name.
As far as you got to know, right? You know the name, and then you know enough about them, right? So you're not against those guys. You're against the guys that they oppose. So he came out pretty much saying, hey, I'm for Antifa, which is disappointing to me. I disagree with him. I think he's ignorant on what Antifa is and what they do. That said, if I were to not, boycott all movies that from people who support Antifa, I don't think I'd be able to watch a single movie, especially not in the West. Hollywood is full of lefties, and this is very much well known. And if you were to ask them, are you anti-fascist? They'd probably 100% say, yeah. So, but it's disappointing. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, can you separate the art from the artist? Like you talked about, these are people with, they're artists with ideas about the world, and they want to represent that world through their art. And that's just a natural process, like Philosopher, you were saying. It's kind of just naturally goes into your art as you are creating something. You want to make it about something. You want it to reflect the world that you believe in, and it just comes out. I don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be malicious, but they think they're doing a good thing, right? They think that they're educating people and that this is how the world really is, and they're making the world a better place.
I think it depends on the individual who's writing it. It's usually how it goes. Who are the writers? They have the purpose behind it. The people they hire, if they're the artists, if the technical bring it to life, they're the actors, the voice actors. Those people could really just part of something awesome. They don't need this underlying message at all. They may even agree with it subconsciously and never thought about it, critically thought through it, as most people do with most things that they learned growing up. They just accept it, and they're like, that's just my worldview, but they don't even understand that that's reality. So I think it just kind of just like any order, any government, you will have people in the system that are not like the main masterminds behind it. plug into the system and thinking that they're getting a certain value or doing a certain thing. But there are, yes, who are more insidious. They may be the silent funder, have had nothing to do with the whole process, but they're like, I'll fund it if you just is the idea you're going with that.
It's like the pawns and the useful idiots.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Bet we could just look up how many people were animating writers are for the story.
And the executive producers, yeah.
Who were the executive
Well, that's true. I mean,
producers?
it's the executive producers who definitely, obviously, they're doing the funding, and they're going to choose whether they want to fund the script or not. And so, to some degree, they're going to be selecting who they think will carry out, their vision with the script when it comes to selecting, line producers or directors and stuff. So, there's definitely that too to just look at. You can probably find a trend there.
Yeah, there was a lot of like pro-status stuff in here. There was the cop who doesn't like the vigilante Spider-Man, so he doesn't like any competition. And I know they didn't come up with the name Jefferson Davis. That was a name for that character from the comics for years. But I find it curious that Jefferson Davis, who was, of course, the president of the Confederate States of America, happens to have the same name as this black cop character. And I wonder, do any of you know the history of why a character in the Marvel universe happens to have the same name? Coincidence?
I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with it to know on that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I mean, they usually sneak in names from comic book creators of the past, or they have some relation to the character. But in this case, I don't know.
All right. Well, I was hoping.
Okay. So you were saying how the cop annoyed you. This annoyed me too. When the cop was going on a rant in the very beginning, when Miles gets in the car and something about Spider-Man comes on the little cop radio, and he goes on the little rant, and he compares Spider-Man to cops, and he's like, cops put their lives on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does Spider-Man.
Spider-Man died.
In fact, he died.
Right.
Yeah, and if you look at a list of like most dangerous jobs, police officers is actually quite low on the riskiness factor. Like loggers is like number one, and factory workers, etc. I'll try to find that and put that on our show notes page because it's pretty interesting.
Well, it's something with with the trope of cops in comics, and especially like movies too, is there's often a theme that the police officers are seen as, no matter what, an ethical good, even if there are bad apples, or even if they make tough choices and do things,
or they make mistakes.
Right, or they make mistakes. They're always presented as an ethical good, and characters who act outside of that, even vigilantism with Batman or Spider-Man, whoever, they're always seen as these rebels who are permitted to do the rebellion as long as it's relatively within the lines of what police want, and they give deference to police at the end of the day. Like the vigilantes are allowed to do their own thing as long as they hat tip to the police at the end of the day, and don't say, oh, they're bad. Don't say, oh, you're unethical or you're corrupt.
They always show the cops coming in to arrest the guy. Put him in
They just say, okay, well, we just don't want to be touched, but you guys are good, right? That's the whole gist that kind of underpins this thing, is that it's this like Overton window of acceptable discourse about police in comics and films, is that you could be a rebel, but you can't rebel too much, right? It's like you're a permissible rebel. It's okay. Some people just have different views. They just need to like express themselves a little differently. That's okay, as long as at the end of the day you lick the boot and you say cops are good, and I'm gonna still help them out and support them, and not say that they're unethical or meaningfully criticize them. And that's intentional. It's meant to do the Hegelian dialectic, which is problem, reaction, solution. You're getting people to see that there's some type of problem, but then you're coming up with that solution, that preconceived end that you want them to be at. And that's what's happening even within that superhero trope, is that these vigilantes are doing things, they're outside the law, but technically at the end of the day they still come back to the police, hand over to them, suggest that they're okay, protect the police, support them and things like that. And by and large, this motif has been undisturbed in most all comics, with a few rare exceptions, like one Superman issue where, and this is in the past, in the Obama presidency, where he's like with protesters and he like has a big chain and he's just stopping police from like going after the protesters. That's it. It's not like he's critiquing the police meaningfully. It's just, oh, don't mess with the First Amendment or something. I mean, that's about as far as it goes, by and large. And there really is a very limited window of discourse that is permitted within mainstream comics and movies. And just the other day I was even researching, just comics for anything that I can find as relates to statism or liberty and things. And there was a brief period, I think, related to the what was his name? It was like 93 around that time, where there was the ATF went after a man because he wouldn't cooperate with them and like work with them, and he shot him and his pregnant wife. It just slipped my mind.
Ridge?
Yeah, Ruby Ridge, right? So
Randy Weaver, I think, right?
Right. So in that realm of time when that was sparking, there was this like Superman comic for like a couple issues. They had this guy called Agent Liberty, and he like defects from the CIA. But even there, talking about his leading to this thing called like, Sons of Liberty or something like that. Like even this like rebellion against the government eventually is shown as bad, and they just want to like overthrow the government. And then he comes back to work, for the government. And it's ridiculous because in every single case, virtually every single case, all the media, all the comics, all the movies have, a kind of controlled rebellion, right? It's like they permit people to think within their rebellion fetishes and to have that kind of, a taste of it satisfied, but then they bring it back, right? So the idea is no matter what, they want to capture everyone's psychology so that no matter what, you get looped back into, well, yeah, I guess the state's the best at the end of the day.
And if they show government as being bad, they always paint it off as a few bad apples.
Rogue cop, bad
them,
apples, they just need to get cleaned up.
There's always good police, good government, if the good mayor at the end being like, thank you for exposing his corruption. Right. You've done a great service to
the mayor can do nothing wrong. He holds the keys to the city. He's just a saint.
You know what I mean? They never show the whole system as.
And who was the bad guy? Who was the bad guy? The capitalist, Wilson Fisk.
Well, in that case, he's also trying to kill people. Or he doesn't care to kill people. But to Jack and Fo's point, anytime that there's any kind of an anarchic character, is always a villain. So in the Batman universe, there is an actual villain called Anarchy.
Right, with a K.
Yeah, and then in the Marvel universe, I believe there's a guy called Anti-Flag. Who's also, I think he's a Captain America villain. Yeah. And so, it's always portrayed in a negative light. These people are outside of the acceptable realm, and they're always, killing people or doing stuff. They're basically Antifa, but,
Like
anyway.
They have understandable reasons for going outside, but they're also going to be violent.
Right. Like even, I think I did a meme that came from Superman versus the Elite. I think that was 2012. It was a movie. And, there's this group of superhumans or people with special abilities who themselves start to actually be effective at taking out criminals. So much so they're even just killing them. You know what I mean? Like, they're actually just like, nah, these people are bad. We're going to kill them. And Superman gets pissed at this. He's like, you can't just do this. He's like, you can't murder people and call yourself heroes. And then the guy who is one of the what will be later bad guys in terms of the show says, oh, really? Well, your government does that all the time. Right. And so it was like a very quick moment. And then Superman's face, like they show his face even being like, oh, that's a good point. But then he doesn't say anything. And he just rolls past it, pushes past it. And it's just one of those moments
he's shown to be the hero
where they give little, of course. At the end, Superman, they're bad. And then Superman just, takes them out. So, even if they give those things, the point is that if they give a rebellion, they couple it with something to make them evil in the end. So no matter what,
absolutely,
it's a controlled discourse.
Or just ignorant.
Right. Or malicious or just murderers. So it's very sick. And a lot of people don't see that because
it's very insidious. That is the subconscious program.
Right.
And when you have movies like this with beautiful artwork, funny jokes like that, that is what is subconscious kids who don't know how to critic, as we've seen with a lot of adults.
Yeah.
But,
well, the college doesn't help.
No.
Yeah. Right.
So bad.
And in that mode, when you're developing prepubescent, you're starting to change at puberty, like the way I phrase that.
You're coming into your age where there's going to be funny stuff happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions you don't know how to critically think yet, and so things that aren't outright stated to you, ideas that aren't outright just symbolically presented, will just your psyche just naturally accept it. Because if it's presented to you like it is reality, and make it into the pretty package of your favorite actor, beautiful artwork, a girl or character that you identify with, well, it'll just really natural as a kid to be, I think that way, like, because it's like cool, it's the culture. That is how they change the culture, is with medium, very beautiful, entertaining artwork, singers, actors.
Lady scientist. Cool. Step 3, I re-examined my personal biases.
What?
That's a quote from the film when Peter goes in and sees Doc Ock.
Oh. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they throw those little things in there too, those little
yeah, they slip it in, and it's very smart. It's craftily put in there to get, again, the close. I mean, I don't know how many movies we could talk about on this, but
a lot.
There's been a couple of recent films that go along with what we're talking about. Even just have you all seen Endgame yet?
I have.
Daniel?
I have not, but I'm like 20 out of 22 movies behind.
Okay, so it's okay to talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, spoiler for Endgame.
Spoiler. Well, it's not an end spoiler. It's just something in the movie. Like for example, in even just Endgame, Civil War already had kind of abandoned the strong rhetoric Captain America had in being anti-government interference in people's lives. That is the film of Civil War as compared to the comic. But in Endgame, now that Disney's got full control, I mean, he basically apologizes to Tony Stark for Civil War effectively. So you already have.
I learned my lesson.
He's like, I learned my lesson.
And
It's
it was
like
so abstract. He wasn't even specific about what he wrong.
exactly.
He just that was just that subconscious nodding. They make up. It's what Tony gets mad at, and they make up and Captain America.
Right. So like they already have apology for what was a serious issue, government registry of heroes and like interference in their lives.
Yeah.
So they're apologizing for that. And then later on, when Captain America is apologizing to Black Widow, he like says nonchalantly, "Oh well, everybody may be gone, but at least the whale population is more populous in the river now because humans are gone." So they give this little nod like, oh, humans, their existence activity is like killing whales basically. And it's like, just like blows it off a little bit, but it's that insidious, surreptitiously placed commentary that's meant to seed it in, oh, people kill the environment. And meanwhile, these same people who literally have the technology to go through time, who can make weapons and spacecraft and all this crazy stuff, they can't use technology to, clean up plastic in the ocean. I mean, it's crazy because that's the whole message they're trying to imbue in people is this idea that technology is inherently evil. It's inherently polluting. Technology, it can't be used to solve problems. It only creates more of them. And humans are the cancer. Humans are the pollution. Right.
It definitely had a genesis eco-fascist behind it too.
Right.
It was just, hey, everything quieter.
Yeah.
No more stuff to go around.
Right.
Like
Let's
they don't
try watching any of the BBC documentaries on Netflix right now with David Attenborough.
It's brutal.
He throws all of
tough.
that stuff into every episode, and we watch it with the kids because we want them to see animals and nature and all this stuff. It's beautiful stuff. But they keep throwing all this commentary in about how terrible humans are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the point. Is these people are? I mean, seriously, they are anti-human, genocidal maniacs. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Is that these people have Malthusian mindsets. They think that scarcity is just going to lead, to people just crazily dying off and polluting everything. When it's been the opposite. That when you free the market, people are freely innovate. You're able to provide for lots of people and rise them out of poverty and actually help clean up things because you have more efficiencies in the market. You can use less. Toxic chemicals. You can use things that save trees, like using digital documents and stuff.
Yeah,
so it's just ridiculous.
Property,
right.
Strong respect. That people are like, okay, therefore the incentive is this. I can't violate my neighbor. I can't just take what I want. So now you have creativity, volunteer.
Creative volunteers. You're saying creativity fuels people's innovations, like in terms of the need.
Yeah, when those individuals know that they have this, okay, I cannot hit or take other people's stuff.
Right.
Well, that is now the structure that they're operating. You have a massive amount of people doing that. That's when wealth is, because now you have people voluntarily be specialized in there. So now you have more productive output. The most they will win out in the market, providing the best.
Right, and you have property rights, so that incentivizes innovators to innovate because they know that they'll reap the benefits of their products in the market.
Right, and that someone's not just going to come in and take everything out from.
Right, and it provides responsibility too for those who affect other people's property or bodies. When you have specific property rights, then you have a delineation of who's trespassing and who's property, who is polluting or spilling toxic waste into someone's property.
Who should you give your money and trade with?
Otherwise, it's just generalized. So, and I mean, it really is nuts how, and in all these films, starting to see a unifying theme, especially because Disney now owns everything, right? I think you're going to just continue to see this theme growing of anti-humanism, which is this idea again of people being a cancer on the earth. People are dirty and gross. They're destroying. You're right. They're destroying the earth. They need to somehow go back to nature, and that like nature is somehow glamorous, and everything was just like free and abundant. There's no bugs. There's no disease. Like it's just absolutely insane.
And
like,
they want to be Thanos.
They want to be Thanos. These people are literally.
The world's quiet again.
They are.
Yeah, the stupid people that celebrate Thanos blew me away.
Yeah,
blew me away.
But what if Thanos was right, though?
What if he was right, though? We need to get rid of all the people because people don't innovate. They don't create things. They aren't net producers.
That was programmed. You got it.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
Not specifically.
Fortunately, it's the Green No Deal. Fortunately, but yeah.
Well, the movie universe is going to get worse probably because in Endgame, they do kind of tip their hat about these earthquakes that are happening underwater.
Yep.
And that may be bringing into being Namor, the Submariner, and he's probably got this underwater aquatic kingdom, and he's probably upset about the humans for polluting, and so there's probably going to be
and they did
there.
that in Aquaman.
And they did that in Aquaman, exact same storyline.
We need to attack these people because they're polluting our oceans, and it's the same thing where you go underwater and you look at these kingdoms, and this, I mean, it epitomizes the people in power. Like what you're seeing in these movies is really more than anything a mirroring of those who actually have this state, cronius power. Yeah. And it's this idea that they magically get all their technology. It just happens, right? There's no concept
of... The Atlanteans are so technical.
Right, Atlanteans are advanced. The people of Wakanda are advanced. I mean, just completely absurd concepts that don't bring in the idea of how trade and shared knowledge across the world benefits people and is what brings up technology in the first place. Right.
Like you can just have this super smart AI. It will therefore allocate perfectly.
Yeah, like you're going to magically essentially plan. And then on top of that, they, again, have a worship of what those in state power really want, which those in state power don't want democratic republics or republics at all. I mean, not that that's, not itself a form of control, but they want their old reigns back, which is why they worship princesses, kings, and those type of unitary rulers, because that is what those in power really want. They want to be back to the ages of kings. They want to be back to the ages of queens and be worshipped and be like, yes, we are your rulers, we are your gods. And that's why they, in Aquaman and stuff like that, they keep focusing on, oh, you're the king. You need to come back and rule. In Wakanda, it's like, oh, yes, you're the rightful king. Well, how? Oh, we murder each other in a sword fight, and then boom, you're king now, and you have all the intelligence to rule people essentially playing.
Right.
I mean, this is literally what those in power think.
I'm loyal to that throne.
I'm loyal to that throne. Whoever sits in that throne, I am loyal. I will sit there and kill people for you.
Manson. I am loyal.
Right. And that's the
and we can't get along without you. We absolutely need you. It's so important. You're so important. You're the most important person.
Right.
But that's
what would we do?
Right, and that's the whole premise, that they're trying to imbue on young minds. I mean, even with things, as benign as Disney movies that seem like, oh, it's just princess stories or Frozen. No, there is a very real philosophy that is being pushed onto kids, and it's this idea. What's that?
It's a real philosophy, Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata, right? I mean, right, they're redoing the Disney movies too, in CGI now, right? So it's the same thing, right? The king of the jungle, right? Oh, we need Simba as king, right? It's the same concept of trying to keep people in a psychology of, oh, you need to be ruled, and if there isn't somebody there, then things just go to chaos, and it's wrong. It's just wrong. Nobody can do anything, and nobody can think for themselves. And that's the whole goal, is to ensure that the population is fully indoctrinated into thinking that without having central planning and leadership, they would be essentially nothing. They would be just killing each other as savages. And it's like literally the total opposite in reality. Anytime the government reels back, anytime governments just stay away, people are like, oh, let's freely trade and do contracts and do deals and enrich our lives. You know what I mean? It's really wild.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Anarchy gets a terrible name. My wife and I have been watching some garbage television, Doomsday Preppers, lately.
Oh, we watched that.
And, a lot of times they have some kind of crazy concerns. Some are legit. But in many of them, they go, it'll be utter chaos and anarchy. They just keep reinforcing the idea that the lack of rulers is going to be destructive and violent.
Yep.
Yeah. Like one guy was like, oh, they're collapsed.
Right.
There are no central planners to be responsible for the economy.
Yeah. Although there was one, I mean, philosophically, it didn't say much, but there was one character with guns and a bunch of silver. Cool.
I think some of them definitely knew and had articulable reasons why they were doing what they're doing, but I'm pretty confident that the producers of the show did not want to cover that aspect.
Yes.
I would agree with that. Anytime you're producing a tight little thing, you don't want to get into some of those uncomfortable issues.
Right.
You got to
wait. Don't tell people about the Federal Reserve. That's a private bank.
You need to make it as entertaining.
Right.
Or you don't need they want.
Yeah.
We should probably wind this back towards Mother's Day or the Spiderverse.
the Spider Mother's
talk about Mother's
Day. This is why Mother's Day status.
Well, we do try to keep this to about an hour, and so we're about at that time, and so we end with a final summary and review. And Robert, you want to start us off, and then we'll go bing bang, ladies first, and then to Jack.
Sure.
I'm identifying as a lady now because Spider-Man told me if I believe, I can be. So here I am.
It's ma'am.
It's ma'am now. Spider-Man.
It's Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Well, I got to give props to our guest for bringing up a lot of the social justice-y, like social Marxism type stuff. I didn't even me, that I'm super trained to it, to like attuned to see it all the time.
Yeah.
It kind of slipped past me. So I really do appreciate that. That said, this movie is beautiful. I think it tells a really nice story. It's an origin story, and I have issues with that. Like all of a sudden, like Miles believes in himself, and then all of a sudden he's just like the greatest Spider-Man of all time, and he's whipping around and beating up the Kingpin, no problem, and he's turning invisible all the time, and he's zapping people, and
He can last in this
as long as he believes.
huge black hole of time and space, like Spider-Man. Fit one.
Yeah, he just became it. Yeah, I mean, he was a terrible Spider-Man. He was struggling the whole time, and then it's like he flipped the switch in his brain, and then all of a sudden he was amazing. And so that, yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I had an issue with that. Like all of a sudden at the very end, he's as awesome as he needs to be in order to beat the bad guys, and he can do it all by himself. He doesn't need the help of all these other Spider-Mans.
Right.
But the movie is a lot of fun, and I really did enjoy all of the. Can't believe I'm going to say it, but the diversity, just because in the characters. I mean, I didn't care if there's a little Asian one and whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, she was a cool character. I liked the Spider-Man Noir. I liked Spider-Ham.
I like the nod to anime.
Yeah, me too. I thought and it's just beautiful and kinetic and amazing action, and they're really talented artists that went into making this movie. And I really tip my hat to all those amazing talented artists that made this movie. Even if, maybe the director is some kind of dumb lefty guy that supports Antifa and cultural Marxist, and that's why we're here. We're trying to counteract that. And we want to create things that equally inspire and counteract that dumbass bullshit. But it's still a great film. And I don't know, like, if now that you've said what you've said and kind of educated me on this, I appreciate that. If I had a kid, I would definitely, like Daniel said, I don't know if I'd let them watch it, especially not without me there in the room kind of talking and explaining things. So but I can't give this anything less than like an 8.5 though. It's just too good. It's too beautiful. So that's that for me.
Cool. Okay. Well, bang bang. He's first. Sir.
It's all right. I'll let you be elated today. Right.
So yeah, for me, I guess in the beginning, I forgot about it. It's interesting. Even that is an example of what happened. The things that you will remember conscious, the art, aesthetic, the beauty. I told it's very pretty art. 10 out of 10 from my end. Draw that, right? It's beautiful art, but when you start to analyze the underpinned subconsciously, and so, to me, this is just another example of needing to have philosophy and self-knowledge about what ideas you're eating as you watch, and trying to be more aware of your brain subconscious in the practice of that. I think it's just pertinent in order to have a society full of people who are rational, are in as a collectivized people, and see the groups on the individual. It's so important. And for any movies like this, you have to do that work yourself as a parent. They had it as well, not just have your child be yet another human being and programs by people who rule over all of or it is, I thought.
So give it a rating.
Give it a rating. Philosophically, I mean, humor-wise, it was good. Humor. The song, I like that song. So I'm just saying, the aesthetics, great. That really high value.
That's a very diverse score, Philosopher.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness.
All right, Jack,
All right.
what's your summary and review?
All right. So I think the overall film for me, I'll give it, just all categories considered, a 7 overall. And what really holds it out of 7 for me is just the artwork, because it was pretty to look at. It was fun. It was new and engaging in a lot of ways in terms of aesthetic. And, some people might not like it, but for me, obviously a comic fan, I did like it. I did like the diversity of characters that they had in terms of bringing in different kinds of cool, Spider-Man or she-males or whatever, Spider-Z's, whatever they were from different dimensions. But I thought that was great. I thought that was a lot of fun for me. Like, that was very enjoyable. But again, the thing that holds it back from being a great film for me is the very clear philosophical underpinning message, and the lack of robust dialogue in terms of how they communicate with each other, the characters, and how they developed both their emotions and their thoughts throughout the film. It was very elementary, and when it comes to PG movies, I usually expect there to be something that is a bone for adults to throw, like Disney movies did back in the day with animated films, where they have double entendres and things that, like, kids can watch, it goes over their heads, but adults can watch it like, oh, that's funny, or like, stuff like that. They didn't have as much of that. It definitely was more childish in just everything. So for that, I was like, but again, very entertaining as a movie, definitely fun to see and worth watching at least once.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I don't really have much to add. I thought it was a very beautiful film as well, but I didn't really care so much for the story or all the little nods to statism and the social justice activities. I mean, there was even when Miles gets to the prep school that he goes to, he says that it's an elitist school and he'd rather be with the people.
Right. And there it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was a big, democratic socialist nod, or what do they call themselves? Socialist Democrats? I forget.
No, and you're absolutely right. That is the goal. And it's, again, it's not a moral thing in terms of like them being like, oh, well, I absolutely won't go, right? It's as long as you just along the way say, oh, I'm privileged and I got to apologize for my privilege at the moment. Then you can stay in your privilege. Then it's okay. Then you can stay at the elite school. As long as you say, oh, poo me, I'm so privileged, right? Then it's okay. But they're not actually like, oh, well, let's leave. This is unethical, right? So yeah.
Well, I am so privileged to have you as our guest.
And you.
Episode. And I'm going to go with a 6.5 on this. So I think you guys talked me down a little bit, and Robert had built me up.
Ooh.
My expectations were a little higher on this movie, and so I think it might have been a little bit of a better score until we had this discussion. But we did.
Yes. No. I mean, it's a pretty film. Aesthetically, independently and so on, I can appreciate other people's arts, even if I don't agree with them politically, philosophically, whatever you're gonna say. I can appreciate the art. But it's a movie, so at the end of the day, I'm gonna be like, this plot, this dialogue, this philosophy.
For me, it's just taught me weary of things that are enticing or entertaining packaging. It really is important to question the motive, whoever for your eyes. It always ties back to it until AI becomes fair.
AI movies.
Until then, it traces back to it.
Until the Skynet and
yeah.
It'll trace back to humans. It's always fascinating and sometimes just annoying to see what message we're trying to indoctrinate. But we are the counter propagandists, and we're trying to do the same thing, culture artifacts that have our beliefs imbued in them of liberty.
Right, and people can find that at thepholosopher.com and volcomic.com, and the links will be on our show notes page. And I hope you guys can stick around a little bit longer for some of our post-show content for our Patreon supporters. People can support us at Patreon, lastnighters.com/Patreon. And Robert, next week we're going to have Dr. Dennis Foster on to talk about The Day the Earth Stood Still, the classic with Klaatu and the destructive robot and world peace and all this stuff. So I think it'll be a very interesting discussion, and looking forward to that. So people do check that out, watch that movie before we publish that episode next week. So you'll be caught up to speed. I think it came out in 1950, 55, something like that.
Is the Keanu Reeves remake, do you know if that follows pretty much the same storyline?
I don't know much about it other than it probably wasn't very good.
What are you? You're not talking about Keanu, right? You're talking about something else, right? You're not talking about Keanu.
Keanu's good in The Matrix and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something
John Wick.
And John Wick, Point Break. Come on, he's the greatest actor of our generation.
And he's so humble. He just rides the bus.
Oh, wait, was that John?
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Speed was pretty good. All right, fine. He's great. All right, so we'll maybe cover that one as well for next week. Anyway, this has been our show, The Last Nighters, episode 71, also found on the Launchpad Media. So thank you guys for joining us, and I'll say good night from last night.
Night.
All right, so we're going to continue the Actual Anarchy podcast for just a few more minutes before we get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive. It's super late for our guests, so I don't want to keep them too much longer. But Jack, they open this Into the Spiderverse with the comic code, the seal, the symbol for the comic code. And I'm just curious if you could talk to that for a moment, and then also posit whether there should be potentially an AnCapistani version, and what would that entail?
I mean, the Comic Code Authority originally was just basically like a censorship group. You know what I mean? That's really what it boiled down to, is they were just, trying to control who would be, approved for sales in, your typical, grocery store, or comic book store, kind of regulating what content or what words were allowed and stuff. And a lot of comic makers, of course, eventually just got tired of that. And that's why eventually, by the time 2000s were rolling around, most people had abandoned it. And then I think it was like 2011 that it went away. That basically, it was like, yeah, we don't need to ask your permission to make comics anymore.
So an MPAA board for comics, essentially?
Essentially, that's my understanding of it. I mean, I read up a little bit about their history, and just recently I looked them up for something. I forgot what it was. Some discussion I was having with somebody. I had to look that up. It's like, oh, okay, do they still exist? And I think they went out of business 2011. But yeah, I mean, it's just basically a type of moral or ethical policing that was private, but to me it was kind of a silly thing. Now, of course, rating agencies could be separate in terms of like saying, oh, okay, this might be appropriate for a certain age group or something like that,
That's definitely
but the MPAA holds a lot of power though on that note. There's a good documentary on that. I forgot the exact name of it offhand, but basically in this documentary they exposed it was just like a bunch of like random people like in this community coming together and watching a movie. It wasn't like they're like some special movie connoisseur people or like, critics or something like that. It was just like regular people coming together and watching a movie, like, oh, okay, this should be R or not. It's kind of a silly thing. It was very secretive, so they had to like, secretly film and see, get the scoop about what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, to me, like, and the market, obviously, if someone wants to make a rating thing for the purpose of just saying, oh, hey, this is age appropriate for something, whatever. But most of that was tied historically to channels, for distribution. So it was kind of more of a communication tool for pre-established channels of distribution. Whether you think of the distributors for films or for comics, it's like their way of like just vetting before it goes to distributor, where it should go or should it not go. But now nobody cares because it's like just put my comic on the internet. If you like it, you do. If you don't, you don't. Or download on demand.
So that's technology making it.
Oh, definitely. It was part of making it obsolete. And people just being like, this is just stupid. It's one of those things where, eventually trying to like micromanage whether you think a whole comic should be approved, is silly, as opposed to even just like a distinguished rating, of saying some things like PG-13, PG, or R or something.
Now, wasn't it Marvel that actually had to fight with the comic code to publish an anti-drug publication?
I think they did. There is something. Yeah, I do remember reading that they were part of some disputes, and there definitely have been several notable disputes with them. I'd have to look it up offhand because it's not my area of expertise. What their history, but there definitely was a number of those instances, and I know Marvel definitely was on the forefront of those issues because Stan Lee was big into putting in philosophical things into his comics. He actually said, "Hey, my comics are actually meant to be contemporary culture pieces, talking about what's going on in the real world and having analogies and metaphors." And he said, like, in a soapbox, little news article that he wrote, he said, you shouldn't have to put your brain on the shelf just because you read comics. So, that's, X-Men dealing with race was a big part of that for Stan Lee because he was very anti-racism and anti-bigotry.
Right. Yeah. He even came up with Black Panther, right? That was one of his creations.
Right, and Luke Cage was even more of a commentary on basically racial tensions in the 70s that were really coming to fruition, and becoming an even more prominent social movement on the heels of Black rights empowerment with MLK and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Well, interesting. Well, I just wanted to throw a little extra content the actual Anarchy audience direction. So thank you for that, for what's the rest of it? Indulging me.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I love talking about that stuff.
Yeah, it definitely shows. And you guys are great. So thepholosopher.com and volcomic.com, Voluntarist Origins 3 will be the upcoming book. That should be out in the fall? Is that kind of the time frame?
I pushed back everything on this one because after the last issue, having, I think as you remember, things didn't go as planned. The people I was working with, took forever, and I had to give them an ultimatum and say, let's get this done. Because it doesn't matter, I'm always good for the comics. I'm going to make it happen myself no matter what. But I realized after that instance that I'm like, okay, I need to have more wiggle room for time in case something does come up. Because it's not like I'm not going to make it, it's going to get done no matter what. But I want to make sure I gave myself a little bit more leeway. on both the artist end and also on the production end, because as I've been actually producing more pages and it's getting bigger, that's actually taking more time than in the past, where I had fewer pages. So of course, turnaround time is a little bit shorter, and I've had to readjust that. So at this point, the goal is, I think it's listed at March 2020. So it's like a total 1 year window from when the comic starts. But, if I get it done earlier, I'm going to, get it done. But I do have built-in wiggle room just in case, because, that's the worst thing is people feel frustrated, and rightly so, if it doesn't come out when they were hoping it was. And I don't want that happening. I want people to get it when they expect it. So I, pushed out the expectation, and hopefully I'd rather, over deliver than under deliver, and make sure that everybody gets it on time. So either March or earlier potentially.
All right, that sounds great.
We don't.
Right, yeah. I already know, I can only control what I control.
The artists are out of our control.
Right. Artists can be very flaky sometimes. And that's why I moved from working with artists one-on-one in the past, then went to a comic group. And now I'm with a new comic group that's actually local to me and near me in the area, in the state.
And they manage the art team.
Right. They manage the art team. Right. So new level of accountability and new level of quality on the art. Costs more, unfortunately. But, you get what you pay for when it comes to this stuff. So I had to bite the bullet and say, I got to be serious and really make sure the quality is up to par.
It's a nice next evolution, I'd say.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got the Indiegogo campaign going on now for the next couple of weeks to get that funding for that higher quality product. So we'll have a link to that on.
Thank you for supporting. Well. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to close it down here and then get into potentially some Kathleen Turner Overdrive. Robert, any final comments for our audience for Actual Anarchy episode 128?
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Tune in next week for The Day the Earth Stood Still. Thank you, Jack and Fo. It's been fantastic. You're welcome back anytime. Got another comic book movie to talk about, or just want to rant about some cultural Marxism? Come on.
Definitely can do that all day, every day. There's tons of that.
All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Target-rich environment.
Yeah.
It's true.
And happy Mother's Day. Maximum freedom, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.
In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.